In the quiet, forgotten corners of the world, there are doors. Doors that shouldn't be opened. The kind that lead to places better left unexplored, to things best not seen. Tonight, in a house long abandoned by light and life, a knock was heard. But it wasn't any ordinary knock. This one was from a place where no mortal soul should ever tread. And as the wind howled, the air grew colder. The silence between the knocks stretched longer, as though something was waiting. A young man, dressed in a tattered shirt and jeans, sat nervously on the floor, looking up at the door, his face pale, eyes wide with fear. He hesitated for a second, but finally stood, slowly approaching the door. The knocking is louder now, unmistakably forceful. With a trembling voice, the man asked, "Who's there?" The door handle begins to turn slowly, as though a heavy, unseen hand is grasping it. The young man steps back, but the door slowly opens by itself. When the door opened, there was no light beyond it, only an inky, endless blackness, a pit that seemed to swallow everything. The man gasps and steps backward, but it was too late. Something is standing in the doorway. The figure that steps forward is a tall, shadowy form, indistinct yet terrifying. It moves with unnatural speed, taking the shape of a man, but with eyes that glow red like embers. The sound of the storm grows louder, merging with the rhythm of a heartbeat. The figure asks in a deep and raspy whispering voice, "You've been waiting for me, haven't you?" The man didn't know why he opened the door. Maybe he thought it was a dream, or perhaps he was simply curious. But what stood before him wasn't a man. It wasn't human. It was the devil. The devil tilts his head, his smile widening, revealing jagged, blackened teeth, then chuckles. "I'm not here to take your soul. Not yet. But I'm knocking, aren't I?" He steps closer. The man looks at the devil, trembling with fear, and asks, "Why? Why are you here?" The devil replies, "Because I've come for something far more precious than a soul. You see, every knock on heaven's door isn't about letting someone in. It's about letting someone out. And tonight, I've come for you." The young man had heard the stories, people who made deals with the devil, only to be cursed to eternal suffering. But this wasn't the same. This wasn't a simple offer of power or wealth. The devil's knock wasn't for any of that. He was here to collect what wasn't his to take. The devil's form becomes clearer. His voice deepens. "Tell me, child, when you hear the knock on heaven's door, do you answer, or do you let me in?" And as the man's hand hovered over the door, he realized that the real terror wasn't the devil himself. It was the door, the one that led to the unknown, the one that called to those who dared to listen. For some, the devil's knock is an invitation. For others, it's a warning. It's time to answer. Who's knocking at your door tonight? They say there's a stairway that leads to heaven, but no one ever talks about the other one, the one that leads down. It's hidden, they say, in the old Holloway house, abandoned for nearly a century. Some say the house is cursed. Others whisper that the last owner tried to buy his way into heaven, but hell had already staked its claim. And if you listen closely on a still night, you can hear him, the man on the stairs. I didn't believe it, not at first. It was a dare, just like every dumb horror story starts. Me, Eric, and Jess, we were looking for a thrill, a TikTok trend, a viral challenge. Go to Holloway House at midnight, find the stairway, see if you hear the music. We laughed. We thought it was just another internet hoax. We were wrong. The house smelled like rot and old books. Our footsteps echoed as we moved through the dust-choked halls. We heard it, a melody, faint but unmistakable. A song, plucked from nowhere, like a music box winding itself. There's a feeling I get when I look to the west. We followed the sound, down the main hall, past a broken mirror, to a staircase that wasn't there before. A spiraling wooden thing, coiling downward into pitch-black nothingness. And at the top of it, just barely visible in the flickering glow of Jess's phone light, stood a man. Or at least, something like a man. His suit was old-fashioned, his face shrouded in shadow. His fingers were too long, curling around the stair railing like blackened roots. And in his other hand, a single gold coin. "You can buy your way up," the man whispered. "Or you can come down for free." His voice was smooth, sweet, but with something rotten beneath it. Eric took a step forward. The candlelight flickered. The music grew louder. The song changed. It was still Stairway to Heaven, but twisted. The notes stretched, warped, played backward. A warning, a threat. I grabbed Eric's arm. "Let's go." But he was staring at the man, at the coin. Jess gasped. Eric's eyes had gone black. Then, he smiled. And before we could stop him, he stepped forward. The man on the stairs reached out his hand, and Eric vanished. No scream, no struggle, just gone, as if he had never existed. The staircase disappeared. The house went silent, but the music still played, and in the distance, from somewhere below the earth, we heard Eric humming along.
I didn't want to kill him, but I had no choice. Sheriff John Brown had it out for me from the start. He said I was trouble, said he had a feeling about me. That's how it starts, right? A lawman's gut instinct, an excuse to watch me, harass me, corner me. And when the day came that I found him standing in my doorway, gun drawn, talking about justice, I did what I had to do. I shot him first. I shot the sheriff, and for a moment the world went still. He fell hard, eyes wide, mouth opening like he had something to say but never would. The gun slipped from his fingers. I ran before anyone could see, before the town could brand me guilty. But something happened that night. It started with a knock on my door, not loud, just persistent. I didn't answer. I didn't dare. The whole town would be out for me, pitchforks and all. Then I heard it, a voice, his voice. "You can't outrun justice, boy." I froze. Sheriff Brown was dead. His body lay in the dirt where I left him. This was just guilt, just paranoia, right? I barely slept that night, and when I did, I dreamt of him, standing over me, blood dripping from his badge, his dead glassy eyes locked on mine. Then morning came, and the real terror began. His body, Sheriff Brown, was gone. The town buried an empty coffin. Some folks whispered that someone must have stolen it in the night, but I knew better. He wasn't stolen, he was back. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me. In the reflections of shop windows, I'd catch a shadow that didn't belong. On the quietest nights, his boots scuffed the ground behind me. And then the voices came. "Murderer. There ain't no escaping me. You can't outrun justice, boy." It got worse. The walls of my home began to rot, his name carved into them, as if by invisible hands. The air stank of blood and grave dirt. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating, and then, one night, I saw him. Sheriff Brown, standing in the corner of my room, his bullet wound gaping, his badge rusted with dried blood. His hand hovered over his holster. "Justice ain't done yet," he whispered. I screamed, fired my gun at the specter, but the bullets just passed through. Then the world cracked. I was no longer in my home, but in a jail cell, my wrists heavy with cold iron cuffs. The sheriff stood on the other side of the bars, grinning, eyes hollow. "Time to pay for what you done." The cell door creaked open. I ran out of my house into the night. But the town wasn't the same. The buildings were abandoned. The sky was wrong, a deep bloody red, and the sheriff's voice echoed from every shadow. "You can't outrun justice." I don't know how long I've been running. When I look back, the sheriff is always a step behind. The town is always watching. There's no escape, no waking up, because I shot the sheriff, and now he's come to collect.
The desert night stretched endlessly, a sea of black beneath a blanket of stars. Daniel's headlights cut through the darkness, but it felt like the road was swallowing him whole. His GPS had long since lost its signal, and he'd been driving in circles for hours. The air outside was heavy, dry, and suffocating. But the heat wasn't the worst part. It was the eerie quiet that seemed to wrap around his car like a thick fog. Then, ahead, the lights of a building flickered into view. At first, he thought it was a mirage, some trick of the desert. But as he approached, the neon sign became clear. Hotel California. A chill crawled up his spine. It looked ancient, as if it had been standing for centuries, an old roadside hotel lost to time. The sign buzzed faintly, and the flickering light only seemed to make it more ominous. There was no other place in sight, not even a gas station. With a sigh of relief, Daniel pulled into the parking lot, grateful for a chance to rest. He parked and shut off the engine, but the silence was deafening. No sound from the wind, no rustling of desert creatures, just stillness, the kind that made his skin crawl. Inside the lobby, the air was thick with the scent of aged wood, something sweet and cloying like rotting flowers. The plush carpet seemed to swallow his footsteps as he stepped forward. The reception desk gleamed, polished gold, and there stood a woman. Her dress was a shimmering, silk-like material, out of place for such a run-down hotel. Her smile was wide, almost too wide. Her eyes, they didn't quite meet his. They were unfocused, distant, like she wasn't really there at all. "Welcome," she whispered, her voice syrupy and slow, like it was dragged through thick velvet. "We've been expecting you." Daniel blinked, confused. Expecting me? His stomach twisted into knots. I didn't make a reservation." She didn't respond. Instead, her smile widened, her eyes glazing over even more. "It's not about that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. A soft ringing sound echoed from behind the desk, and the woman's hands glided over the surface, grabbing a key from a bowl of tarnished brass. She slid it toward him with an unnerving grace. "Room 306. It's already been prepared for you." Prepared for him. How? He wanted to protest, but instead felt his legs moving, his feet carrying him toward the elevator. The whole place seemed to hold its breath as he passed, as though it was watching him. The elevator doors creaked open, revealing a dim, cramped space. The soft hum of machinery was the only sound as it began its slow ascent. Each floor passed with agonizing slowness, the metallic walls seeming to pulse with a strange energy. When the elevator finally stopped, the doors opened to a narrow hallway, lit by flickering lights that cast long, unnatural shadows. Room 306. The door to the room creaked open on its own as Daniel approached, the hinges squealing in protest. Inside, the room was a perfect snapshot of another time. Velvet curtains draped the windows. An antique record player spun softly in the corner, the music familiar but out of place. Hotel California, the song that seemed to drift through the air like a warning. The furniture was polished, almost too polished, as if it were being kept in a state of constant preservation. But the air was stale, stagnant, as though it had never been disturbed. The bed was perfectly made, but there was a tension to the room, a heaviness that made Daniel uneasy. He sat on the edge of the bed, trying to shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. The song continued to play on the record player, its haunting melody wrapping around him, pulling at his mind. Suddenly, the whispering began. Soft, distant at first. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. It was coming from everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, his own thoughts. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they felt like they were scraping against his bones. Daniel leapt from the bed, his heart pounding in his chest. He rushed to the door, twisting the knob with desperate hands, but it wouldn't budge. He slammed his shoulder against it over and over, but it remained locked, solid as stone. The whispers were growing louder, closer. He could hear the faint shuffle of footsteps in the hallway outside his door. Slow, deliberate steps, echoing like they were dragging on the walls. You can check out any time you like, but you never can leave. A cold breeze swept across his face, though the room was sealed tight. The lights above him flickered and buzzed. In the reflection of the mirror across the room, Daniel saw the woman from the lobby, standing just behind him, her face contorted into a smile that stretched unnaturally wide. "Leaving so soon?" she asked, her voice thick with mockery. His breath caught in his throat. He spun around, but the room was empty. The door still wouldn't open. The whispers were now inside his mind, crawling into his ears, digging into his very thoughts. With trembling hands, Daniel reached for the window, only to find that the glass wouldn't budge. The curtain billowed outward as if the wind was pushing from the other side, but the outside world was nothing but blackness. No stars, no desert, just emptiness. You can check out any time you like, but you never can leave. Daniel screamed, a raw, guttural cry that shook his entire body. His nails scraped against the window, but nothing changed. The walls felt like they were closing in on him, tightening, pressing him into the space until the air was too thick to breathe. And then, as suddenly as it had started, everything fell silent. Morning came with no explanation, and Daniel found himself back in bed as if nothing had happened. He grabbed his bags and sprinted downstairs. The lobby was empty, the golden desk now covered in dust. The neon sign outside had vanished, the hotel a crumbling ruin. His car was gone. And when he turned around, the woman from the night before stood at the entrance, smiling. Leaving so soon? Daniel opened his mouth to scream, and the door shut behind him. Daniel was never to be seen again.
It all started with the song. It was just a song. Yesterday, a song that I used to love. But now, every time I hear it, it's like a clock ticking backwards, pulling me into a loop I can't escape. The first time it happened, I was alone in my apartment. It was late. The kind of late where the whole world feels like it's holding its breath. The song came on, soft, melancholic, haunting. And then, nothing. For a moment, everything was still. But then, the clock. It started ticking louder, faster until it became deafening. And then the voices, whispers in my ear. At first, I thought they were just in my head, just my imagination. But no, it was the song. Yesterday. Suddenly the song started over, as if I had hit repeat, but I hadn't touched anything. Confused, I tried to turn it off, but the radio wouldn't budge. I pulled out the plug. No effect. I grabbed the dial and twisted it with force, and still it played, over and over. I checked my phone. Same song, playing on repeat, no app open. How? My heart raced, sweat on my palms, but I tried to ignore it. Just ignore it, right? That's when I heard the knocking at my door. It was soft at first, gentle even, but then it became frantic, erratic. My door rattled in its frame. I froze, knowing I was alone. Who could it be? The knocking turned to shouting, words that I couldn't quite make out. The voices in the song. They grew louder. Yesterday, all my troubles seemed so far away. They mocked me. I cracked the door open. Just a sliver. Nothing. Just the streetlight outside flickering. I shut it fast. My breathing was erratic, my heart pounding in my chest. But then the song started again. It wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was coming from outside the door. Yesterday, love was such an easy game to play. I pressed my ear to the door, listening. The voice singing was me. But it wasn't me. It was wrong. It was distorted, like a broken record. A voice that wasn't mine, but sounded like mine, and yet felt empty, hollow. I backed away from the door, tripping over furniture. As I fell to the ground, the world around me seemed to blur. My body felt heavy, like I was sinking into quicksand. And then, suddenly the door flung open by itself. And there, in the hallway, standing motionless, was me. Or what was supposed to be me. It had my face, my eyes, but its expression was empty, blank. A void where there should have been life. Its lips moved, but the words were wrong. Yesterday. Yesterday. The song echoed in the hallway, louder, over and over. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen, trapped. Then it spoke again, this time clearer. Do you remember yesterday? Do you remember how it felt? I didn't know what was happening. Was it me? Was it something else? I had no answers, no way to break free. And then, in an instant, everything went dark. The sound of the song faded, and I woke up. In my bed. It was yesterday again. The same song, the same voices, the same knocking at the door, and I realized there was no escape. The day kept repeating, over and over. Yesterday. And every time it happened, I lost a little more of myself. It's been weeks now. Or has it been months? I can't tell. Time doesn't matter anymore. I'm trapped. Just me, the song, and the knocking. The knocking that won't stop. If you hear the song, turn it off. Don't let it take you too. You'll hear it yesterday, over and over, and there will be no way out.